Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains episode number 714 for the 23rd of September, 2019. This is the pre-show, that magical, marvelous time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say very outrageous things. And if you are interested to go right to the meat of the show here, the content, just move the little scrubber over about 15 minutes. If you're watching us live, you know the deal. This is where we could say some pretty crazy stuff here. So this is where I get our act together, get the right embed codes going on here, get all the guests on the show. And really and truly, I don't need to start it so early anymore. But back when we used Google Hangouts, we would start at like 10, 11, 12, 13 after the hour, because it took 15, 16, 17 minutes just to try and make it start on time at 30 after the hour. But with the newer platform we are using, it's much easier. And we really don't need to come on this early. So I could go take a nap or something. What's happening here? We've got, I know Dr. Marshall Shepard is scheduled to be on the show tonight. That's always great when Dr. Shepard is on. Dr. Shepard, of course, is on the faculty of the University of Georgia, longtime friend of the show. You've heard his podcast, Weather Geeks, with the Weather Channel. And let me pull up Bill's notes. I got a million things to talk to him about. But I do believe the topic at hand is a suggested topic concerning, I think, rain distribution and urban areas. Could there be enhanced rain with the urban rainfall effect in spots? Could there be rain shadows from the urban rainfall effect? So we'll talk to him about that and a million other things. I got a lot of things to talk to Dr. Shepard about. Here's a selfish personal plug. We have a book signing Saturday in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I will be at the Paul Bryant Museum Saturday morning from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. That's 4 hours, which is before the Alabama-Ole Miss football game, which is on campus. So if you are interested in getting a copy of my book, Weathering Life, and getting it signed and some photos and have some fun, we'll be there for 4 hours at the Paul Bryant Museum. Fascinating place. If you've read the book, you know my life story. I moved to Tuscaloosa when I started fifth grade. And Paul Bryant was the coach at the University of Alabama. I went to school at a small elementary school right across the street from what was then called Denny Stadium, where they played football. And I used to sell programs to get in those games free. If you sold all your programs, you get in free. And I was good at it. I could sell those suckers. But anyway, just fascinating history of University of Alabama football and Southern culture. So hope to see a lot of you there Saturday morning from 9 until 1. Now that we have the selfish personal plug out of the way, let me invite our folks to come on the show with me here. I know that Bill Murray is out. We do believe it's 50-cent beer night at Hooters. You know that, whenever Bill is not here. So I am just going to keep inviting people until I got nobody else left to invite here. Let's see. I think Dr. John is out. He said he had a lot of stuff going on here. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we've got the regulars invited. And invite Dr. Shepard. And let's bring them in. So now, just like magic. By the way, we got some cool new audio.
From Television City in Birmingham, this is WeatherBrains.
Anybody recognize that theme? I'm pretty sure that's Hollywood Squares. If you've watched on this new platform, we have the option of giving you the Brady Bunch, the Hollywood Squares look. and everybody in a square in a grid. And that could be our new intro. Thanks. I need to, one of our great producers, our listeners, sent that in. We call our listeners producers because they basically sent some great stuff. Um, Classics like this.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? Off and on again. Off and on again. Have you tried turning it off and on again? That normally does the trick.
Uh-oh, you caught me playing some music, Dr. Shepard. I'm sorry. How are you, sir?
Hey, James, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for
Good.
taking the time. I know it's late. You got to be there early tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to go to DC. I got to go testify before Congress.
Testify. Testify. Come on. Can I get an amen? I'll be your amen corner.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. So I'm glad to see. I see Taylor's on board over there. How's she working out?
I hired her because of you.
Well, that's pressure. I hope she works out.
She's great. Let me. I have to be careful because a lot of our other hires are probably watching this, but coming out of the gates, I think she's the best hire we've had in a long time.
Is that right?
She is a self-starter. Have you ever seen her notes that she took in class over there?
Yeah, she had me. She took my I had her for mesoscale meteorology, and I had her for maybe SatMet, satellite.
Well, she kept all her notes, and she's like a calligrapher. I mean, it's just beautiful.
She was one of
took class.
She was one of our best. Yeah, little short story. She and I went to the same high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're both from Canton, Georgia.
Wow. Well, she's doing great. She's she'll be in the hot seat during the tornado outbreak. She'll be in there with me. And, I told her, you will become my soulmate. You and the director, the technical director, the three of us have to be thinking, and our hearts have to beat in parallel,
right,
to do this right. And I think she's ready for it. Her.
Yeah, no, she's been around. I mean, God, I'm trying to think how long she's been out of school now. She's been out there for a while, a couple of years now.
Yeah, for those that are watching the pre-show here, we hired Taylor Serrallo to join our staff here recently, and she is a product of Marshall's program at the University of Georgia, and she, right out of school, she was the chief meteorologist for WTVY in Dothan, Alabama, which is a smaller market, but it's an active weather market. And from there, she went to Mobile, Alabama to work with Alan Seals. And so she is leaving Channel 5 in Mobile, and she has joined us, and if you watched all the YouTube hours of tornado coverage, for years I had Jason Simpson and then Charles Daniel, and Charles resigned to go take care of his kids. They're kind of severe on the autistic curve, and there had to be a stay-at-home parent, and he made the sacrifice to do that, which is remarkable. But she'll be taking Charles' place, and she'll be with me in the studio on the tornado outbreak. So you will see her, and boy, her ability to work the graphics box and her knowledge of severe local convective storms, it is just top notch. So it's going to be good.
Good luck with it.
Yeah, she's going to do just fine. Kev's getting plugged in. So I was noticing we're about to go into conflict with DirecTV and AT&T, Uverse.
Are you guys in that whole negotiation world now with that?
Oh yeah, everybody goes through it. I mean, it's just
yeah. Weather Channel went through it for a while.
oh yeah. It's and what it is, the business model is changing rapidly, and what has supported us and a lot of these entities for years is changing, and things have to change at some point, and change is hard in a case like this. And they're trying to get these last contracts in, and at some point, I think something better will come of it. And I said this publicly in Huntsville at the NWA meeting a couple of weeks ago. I said, most older geezers like me talk ugly about millennials. I don't, because quite frankly, I think they're brilliant. I think they're hard workers. I think they will invent a new model that will be a lot better than the one I've been working with here for 40 years. and I'm excited about the future. I do think there's going to be some pain during the transition, which is just natural, but I have full faith in them.
Yep.
Yeah, you missed my tirade at the NWA
You
meeting.
know, I was going to try to come over there for the day. I just had my daughter had volleyball all weekend, so I had to go to her tournament. But I actually thought about running over there for the day, given all that was going on, just to kind of show support for the Weather Service guys and women.
Yeah, you know, I don't even know what the topic of my talk was, but you submitted abstract, and you're supposed to stick with your research and your findings, but I just went off the rails. I mean, they know I'm the guy that's going to be obnoxious enough to do, because that was the 800-pound monster hanging over that room, and so I was like the first guy on Sunday morning, and so I went off on a tirade.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did it.
It wasn't an entire tirade. Part of it was an encouragement to the younger people, because I wanted them to hear that from me, some old guy, that there's a lot that have full faith in you. I'm not so sure my generation is even close when it comes to work ethic and academics, and I think they're great. So,
well, it's important because look, I have a kid that just got hired by the Weather Service literally this past week. And so I'm teaching kids, and, when they see that kind of thing, I mean, that kind of vectors them away from wanting to go into that world. So, I mean, to hear something like what you said reassures them, because a lot of them that look up to you and what you have to say. So I really appreciate it.
I spent most of my time in those mentoring sessions, and I met a lot of students from all over the country. So you got some in there from Penn State and OU. Of course, a lot of UGA students were there.
Yeah, we don't send as many to NWA as we do have a few there. We don't send as many to NWA as we do AMS, because we just have a budget each year for one conference, and they tend to choose to go to that one for the full, because we're gonna have about 20 of them at AMS in Boston.
Yeah, I might have to go to that. I can't miss Boston. I'm a Boston guy. It's 100.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be in Boston. Yeah, I'll definitely be up there. 100th anniversary meeting. It's gonna be big. Assuming we don't have any weather.
I'm hoping we have a nor'easter that just blows through there, and we're all there. I mean, it's not we're there, and I think it would be awesome.
I think
Aubrey,
there's a good chance. I think there's a good chance we'll get something, but that was a calculated risk they took. So,
Aubrey, are you going to Boston?
I would love to go. I really didn't think I was going to. And then over the last couple of weeks, I've been thinking about it. So I'm toying with the idea, looking at the cost, and it's on my radar right now. And I mean, it is, I do like Boston. I am a Yankee, but I do like Boston. But January, man.
Yeah, no.
Come on,
Boston,
Kevin, you're a New England guy. You got to go to this thing.
I lived in Boston as a kid for a number of years. Yeah, it's a great town. I don't think I'll make this one. I'm setting my sights on Tulsa for NWA. But yeah, Boston might be a stretch.
If I do go, I will take you guys to the best pizza place.
Where is that, do you think?
Pizzeria Regina.
Oh, I feel like I know that name. It's been many, 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 many years since I lived there. How old is that place?
Oh, it's up there, and I can't remember what street it's on, but it is.
It's in the North End.
It's in the North End. Yeah.
I was there, back in August last month. We go there every time we go to Boston. That's one of the standard stops. Of course, for the North End, you've got so many restaurants, it would take you like 5 years to go to all these places.
Yes.
But they're so good.
My favorite was always Quincy Market. I always liked that place.
What? I never heard of it. Where is
Quincy
it?
Market? Come on, downtown.
I have some good steamers at Quincy.
Yeah, they have a wonderful. I can't remember what I think the central building has.
Faneuil Hall.
Faneuil Hall. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, no, wait a minute. Is that the long one with all the food and the shops and things? That's Faneuil Hall.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like a tourist trap now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was fun because there's a lot of different foods in there and little shoppy things on the side. Yeah, that was a big deal when I was a kid because we'd take the train in, and then when I got to drive driving on my own, I would drive to the train station out in the suburbs and take the T into Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Quincy Mackett.
It's been a few
Hey,
years.
when were you and Ellen in the hazardous weather test bed? How long ago was that?
It was last June, so it was 2018. It was
Okay.
last year, yeah. Last summer.
You went up to Mount Scott, didn't you?
We did.
You know, that road has been closed for a year now.
Really?
They had some heavy rain and they found one or two spots that had washed out runoff. But then as they went up to start looking at those spots, they found over 100 other spots that had been weakened.
Wow.
And so it's closed to automobiles. You can still ride your bike or walk up, apparently. But it's really depressing because it's, it's just a wonderful thing as the Wichita Mountains together are. But to go up to top of Mount Scott, that's just a huge thing. And there appears to be no solution to fund to getting it fixed.
How can I screen share on this thing? Because I took one of my favorite sunset photos. I don't know how to screen share on this thing.
I thought it was down on the bottom.
Down on the bottom.
Oh, I might be wrong.
Share?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so
Share.
this
The green
one.
share.
Share. Can you see that?
Ooh.
Oh, I know that view. Yeah, that's one.
So, and if you kind of look just to the left of the sun, that was actually an anvil cloud. And when we pulled up radar scope, the only storm was just over the Colorado border. So that's that's an anvil cloud from Colorado.
Yeah, you don't get that luxury being where you are, but I get that all the time where I can see something a million miles away, and because it's flat, and then I can punch it up on radar. I go, or on my tower cam here, I do that often. It's cool. Yeah, it's kind of tragic that you can't get up there. At least with a car. I know.
That was a great spot. Oh my gosh, you saw so many buffalo. That was a cool day.
That's a cool day, isn't it? Yeah, or a cool thing. I've been out.
Welcome our television viewers. Sorry, Kev.
I was telling a story. Who cares about your television?
We're in the middle of Oklahoma brains right now.
Oklahoma. No, welcome to our TV viewers. We're about to start the show. Kevin, go ahead.
Show title.
No, it's too late now.
Well, let's get started.
Every time he opens the thing, he says shares yada 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 and boring personal stories. And here I am in the dead center of a boring
personal story. I know.
It was a good one too.
By the Birmingham.
Marshall, help us, please.
Hey, Troy.
Hey, how are you doing, bud?
By the way, I apologize. My little studio here is right next to my son's game room. So if you hear firing,
this is fantastic. Yeah, that is a show title.
All
right, let's get this. Yeah, let's get this thing started here. Every time I show radar to like third graders, and the first thing they'll say, "Hey, man, that's Minecraft."
Ah, that's funny.
No, this is radar. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 714, the weekly show that's all about weather. This is for September 23rd, 2019. Ooh, this is the equinox, ladies and gentlemen. But before we do anything else, we have a brand new show open. You ready for this? Here we go.
Okay.
From Television City in Birmingham, this is WeatherBrains.
So since we have the new look here, the Hollywood Squares look, I think this is awesome. Does anybody remember Hollywood Squares?
Yes, of course.
Now, I would imagine I'm the only guy old enough here to remember the Brady Bunch. But this is the kind of grid thing. So that's awesome. So welcome. Glad you're here. We got a few folks that are out this week. We know that Bill Murray is out. It's 50-cent beer night at Hooters. So, Bill is there. Dr. John Scala says he is buried with an avalanche of work and he can't make it tonight. But Aubrey, it's always nice when you're here.
Oh, well, thank you.
The nerves of our panelists. So thank
you. No, it's always nice when you're here, James.
So the equinox was this morning. Where I am, it was like 2:50, 3:50 your time.
They say the equinox is here.
Tony Rice has been keeping us on top of the equinox news here. So does it feel like fall in Virginia?
No, summer's still here. Actually, we do get a taste of fall. It's actually very comfortable out right now. We get a taste of fall overnight and tomorrow, but then summer returns for the next, who knows how long, couple weeks, 3-4 weeks, maybe.
Send some of that stuff down to Texas, Aubrey.
Yeah, same here. Georgia too.
Next time I get a
Troy,
good wedge, I'll send it down your way.
Alrighty.
Troy Kimmel's in Austin. How hot today, Troy, on the first day of fall?
On the first day of fall, it didn't get quite as warm today. It got up to 100, which tied a record at Camp Mabry here in Austin, and 97 out the big airport. So it's cooling down. I thought about grabbing a coat today, down to 100 degrees.
I will say, 97 in late September doesn't feel like 97 in August to me, at least where I am. In July and August, the heat is just like a damp dish rag that just covers everything.
But isn't it in Alabama like that right now, though? I mean, the
dew points are not as bad. The sun goes down a little bit earlier. The heat, it can be 97 degrees at 10 o'clock at night here. But at least we don't get that this time of the year.
Well, I can tell you where those dew points went. They came to Austin. So
there you go. It's our gift to you.
Thank you.
So Kevin Selly is in Wichita Falls, Texas, who is manning the operations this evening at the Channel 3 Weather Center. Kev, what's happening?
Oh, we did 89 today. The dew points, though, we've had some rain, so the dew points are running in the low to mid 70s, which is really unpleasant, of course. I just want to say, though, what a privilege and an honor it is to be on the Weather Geeks program with Marshall Shepard. It's an honor to be invited on that program. This is a thrill for me.
I'm trying to figure out, does he want an invitation or is he confused?
I
don't know.
Isn't this the Weather Geeks program?
It's both. It's both, James.
What show is this?
This is I don't know. Dr.
Hollywood
Marshall
Squares.
Yeah, Hollywood Squares.
Hey,
Dr.
Kevin,
Marshall Shepard.
I've got to up my rate if this is Weather Geeks.
Dr. Marshall Shepard is our longtime friend of the show from the University of Georgia, the Weather Geeks guy. Let's do a timeline on Weather Geeks. So the show started on television in 2014, right?
God, I think so. 2014-ish. Yeah, we had about a 4-year run. And then as you were talking about earlier when we were talking, the landscape of TV is changing. They wanted the 18 to 45 viewer that probably doesn't watch TV much anymore. So we switched it over to a podcast that's doing very well. So yeah, I guess we got about a 5-year run.
Now, when you do Weather Geeks, are you in a studio or are
I'm
you
at the Weather
home?
Channel. No, I'm at the Weather Channel. I go in every we release a new episode every Wednesday. We've got several. We have probably because of my schedule, because that's kind of my side thing. We have several that we kind of keep queued up, and so we release one every Wednesday. So yeah, we go down to the Weather Channel. I mean, we just had had a FEMA in there. We got some other pretty big deal guests coming up. I can't say much yet, but yeah, we're getting some good folks.
Oh, just say it here. Nobody's listening but us girls here. So,
you know the business. It'll be people who want to hear from. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. So the nice thing about the new format, you are not preempted by active weather anymore.
Well, the really nice thing that I like is we got 40 to 50 minutes, whereas essentially we had 16 minutes in the show because of the weather on the 8s and the commercials. So, and candidly, it just works a little better for my schedule. I've got so much more going on right now. This is a little bit better for all the, like I said, I was telling you earlier, I'll be up in DC on Thursday testifying before the House Science Committee on extreme weather. So, I wear a lot of hats, and so they were accommodating. They liked the brand. They wanted to keep it around, and so I appreciate that they're able to make some adjustments for me.
Kevin, would you send Dr. Shepard a WeatherBrains logo so he can put it on his jacket when he's testifying? Of course, he can have Weather Geeks on one side and WeatherBrains on the other side.
We still never did that mashup show we talked about doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That would be fun.
But anyway, you, Dr. Shepard, how do you do this? I mean,
I don't know.
How do you find the time? Because understand, this is my greatest struggle. And I like to ask people like you that don't stop and don't sleep and don't eat, and you're able to do all of this. what's the success, or how do you be a successful person that stays so busy in the weather enterprise?
Well, it's for me, James, it's always been who I am. And if you go back and look at me in high school and college, it was the same way. I mean, I was president of my fraternity. I was senior class president. I mean, I just always have had my hands in a lot of different cookie jars. But for weather, it's easy. It's like all of you all. I'm just passionate about it. I care about it, and I can't keep my mouth shut. So I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to write about it. And it's just, how it is, James, and everybody on the panel. We're passionate about it. We would do this all for free. I mean, we would be sitting here talking about this somewhere, no matter if we were getting paid for it or not, if we weren't, it wasn't part of who we are. So it's just what I'll do, and until I can't do it anymore, I'm blessed to do it.
So, Marshall, you, as somebody who has his hand in a bunch of different things, tell us your view of Sharpie Gate and all the surrounding
things ridiculous.
From your chair.
Absolutely ridiculous. And of course, we know all the dynamics. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, look, the Weather Service, the men and women of the Weather Service were doing their job. There was a hysteria, there was a panic started being created by all of this talk. I think for me, the big lesson, I don't know all the details, but just some things that I'm seeing from some of the exit reporting from the Capital Weather Gang and others, we've got to have meteorologists in the room. When we're talking about weather things, we've got to have meteorologists in the room at all times. And so that's one of the big lessons that came from this. Look, Neil Jacobs, I like Neil. Neil's a good colleague of mine. He's been to the University of Georgia speaking in my class. I mean, I had him on Weather Geeks recently. So, I understand the pressures he's under, and I appreciate the fact that he's making this visit, this tour around the Weather Service offices now. I think that's a very positive step. And, I'm not blaming any particular person or persons involved, but we have to always stand by. We have to always support our National Weather Service colleagues and anyone working with our National Weather Service colleagues. Look, they're not doing this. They don't have any agendas. They're just trying to save lives and property.
Amen.
So Dr. Kelvin Trogemeyer of OU, he is the director of the Office of Science and Technology. He was, as I understand it, Marshall, he was not involved in any of these briefings, right? Kelvin understands weather.
I've heard people talk about that. I actually don't have as much of a problem with that. And here's my rationale why. He's a meteorologist, but his job is the head of OSTP, the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So, I don't have a problem with Kelvin not being in the room, but I certainly want Louis Uccellini in the room. I certainly want Neil Jacobs in the room. I certainly want Ken Graham in the room, because that's what those people are certainly adequate enough to do the job.
But yeah, and again, I was kind of in the middle of this whole thing too, and it just got out of hand really quick, and it just never went away. And that's where I will tell you, my friends at the National Weather Service in Birmingham, they just want it to go away. They just want people to stop talking about it, to move on. That attention that was cast into their office was unexpected, and it was very harsh. And for a lot of the younger meteorologists that work down there, this was scary stuff. They didn't know if they're going to lose their job. They didn't know what was going to happen to them. And it's a very odd environment that we're in right now. And I'm glad to see that it's starting to fade away. And my other concern, Marshall, was that let's say by chance, just a hypothetical situation, we had a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico right now. The messaging gets really complicated after this episode because of the political loyalties in this country. And I can't tell you how it was a bizarre week. And I have great concern that whole thing was going to limit the ability of the weather enterprise to communicate critical information with the public. Absolutely. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Can I say a little bit more about that? Because that was my big concern. We already deal with the little jokes and cliches about us being wrong 50% of the time. It must be nice to have a job where we're wrong. When we're not, we're actually right most of the time. We have our moments where we're not. But that was my biggest concern. My biggest concern is that you were going to have a degradation of credibility among our National Weather Service, our NOAA, our National Hurricane Center colleagues. When there is a significant threat, people are going to, we can't believe them, or here we go again. And that's why I said what I said earlier. I know the good people of the National Weather Service. You all know them. They literally were just doing their job, period. And so for them to get caught up in this sort of just the whatever's going on in this country right now, I try to sort of stay out of all of that as much as I can, although I'm going to be thrust into it this week. Whatever's going on in this country right now, the weather, I mean, even, I don't know if y'all going to ding me or ring any bells, but even with climate change, I know there's stuff going on with that can be political, but weather should never be politicized.
But Marshall Troy here, and I think you and I think the same on this. I think we can carry this basically back to the fact that we're not doing a lot of critical thinking in this country right now, Marshall. There's a lack of critical thinking skills going on in various places, which I'll let people decide where. I hate to say that, but we're thinking emotionally. We're not thinking critically.
Yeah, no, Troy, I mean, but here's the other thing. Can we go down the road of the spaghetti models and the hurricane cones for a second? Because I think you're right, Troy, but here is something that I think needs to come out of this to some degree. I think we need to really think carefully about what kind of information is available publicly.
Amen.
In terms of these, because we know when a spaghetti model's out there that all those lines aren't created equal. But when somebody sees that, or when they see these colorful plots of probability of tropical storm winds, those are useful tools for us as meteorologists. But someone sees that little green in their area, they don't notice that that's a 10% chance, and so they may interpret. So I just think it's an opportunity just to really think carefully about the information dissemination on some of these probabilistic products, because we already know most people don't know what 40% chance of rain means anyhow. And then,
and I'll tell you too, Marshall, in my opinion, I've always said that the day that the various model runs on hurricane forecast, the day that went public, was the Pandora's box was opened. It'll never be shut again. I always think that you've got to think about that. And what worries me even more than that, Marshall, is I believe that there are some emergency managers in this country don't know what that means sometimes. I mean, it's a tool. It's a tool in our tool set, but I'm sorry the day that those ever got released to the public.
But how are you going to put that genie back in the bottle?
Oh, it's not going back.
It's not going back. Absolutely.
But you said, it's time to have a conversation about it. So that would assume.
No, I'm not I thought you were talking the genie in the bottle, meaning what Troy was just talking about, the models. I think they're, Weather Service is already doing things like the hazard simplification program, facets, and other things where they're thinking about messaging. That's an ongoing issue. So all I'm suggesting is, in the same way that we've had conversations about the risk categories for thunderstorm risk, marginal, high, whatever, moderate, we need to have a conversation about when we're putting out on public Twitter sites, for example,
Thank you.
a 10% like probability tropical. Who's that for?
Yep.
I mean, is it for my mom? Because she doesn't know what that means.
But how are you? This is and I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly I agree with your points, but I'm playing devil's advocate, and it inevitably always swerves into anti-social media for me. But that stuff's out there, and we're not putting that what I meant by not putting it or putting it back in the bottle is it is going to be out there.
Well, the one thing that I'll tell you,
it is going to be done by people forecasting in their jammies in their parents' basement, and then the next step is going to be this probabilistic forecast stuff.
Well, one thing that I do like, and there are some sites that do this, Marshall and Kevin and everyone, I love the sites where these are out there, and we're not going to pull them back in, but it says at the bottom, this is for meteorologist use only, or these should be used cautiously by anyone outside of meteorology, because you're not trained to know exactly what this means. And so I like it. Those sites that have that on there, I think it's just a cautionary note.
The problem is, I think a lot of these people behind the scene that aren't meteorologists think that they're better than the meteorologists. And that's the problem is, yes, there's this caution on the bottom, but I got not into it, but had a few words with some guy on Twitter the other day who thinks can out forecast most other people. And when I went through his Twitter feed, all it is posts of deterministic runs and run after run. Oh my gosh, the 0Z did this and the 18Z did this. And this is and there's no context there. Yet he still thinks that he can better forecast better than anyone.
And that's the stuff that spreads because it has that inherent nature that the platforms play to get it to spread. And James and I have had, as much as we've disagreed on social media, we've had the same collective groans on the number of programs we've had here with regard to the probabilistic stuff. Because when you come out and you say, okay, there's a 40% chance that there's going to be a tornado in X location 90 minutes from now, that is going to, that's going to make the stuff we're going through now look like child's play.
Yeah.
James.
So let me, let's go back to the spaghetti. This is an interesting topic. Should we be showing spaghetti models on TV or social media, whatever? There's an interesting case study in Florida. What Facebook page reaches more people than any other in the state of Florida when it comes to disseminating weather information? Anybody have any guess?
Probably Tropical Tidbits.
No.
Facebook?
It's a Facebook page.
It's a Facebook page.
Is it the National Hurricane Center?
No.
What is it?
iForecastforFlorida.com.
From the basement in my underwear. Yeah.
Spaghetti models.
So Tropical Tidbits has 55,000 followers. And I pulled all of these up recently because I was going to do a talk on this and I just didn't have time to put it together. It is not a television meteorologist. It is not a television station. It is not a National Weather Service forecast office. It is not the National Hurricane Center. Mike's weather page.
Oh, yeah. I'm familiar with it too.
How many people do you think follow Mike's weather page?
Who is Mike?
761,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
And who is Mike?
Is Mike actually trained?
He has more followers than all the TV Mets combined, probably in Florida,
right.
and look, the Weather Service offices.
Nobody wants. Go ahead.
Here's my point. Here's my point. He shows spaghetti modeling, and I think he does a good job. He's not a trained meteorologist, no, but I think his content is good. And people, what he's doing, he's figured out the secret of getting big numbers on social media. Number one, he's giving people what they want. They almost demand it now. You can never put that horse back in the barn. If they're not going to get it from me or any professional, they're going to go over to Mike's weather page, which they do now. I saw some guy at a library. I was doing a program. He was up here from Tampa Bay. He said he refuses to look at any television meteorologist site because they're not updated frequently. They're not responsive. He goes to Mike's weather page where he gets everything he needs. Mike's weather page is giving people what they want, and he's giving it to them on a frequent basis. He is always there. And he is engaged. He responds to them. Yep. And most people with the Weather Service and television meteorologists don't. And so the deal is, if we don't provide this with proper context, they're going to go to Mike's weather page and get it there. Or
it's
other sites like this.
Here's the thing. You've hit on the two original foundation problems, and nobody wants me to go down this road again, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Oh, go.
Number one is we legitimized these platforms, Facebook and Twitter, by being there. And number two, you just said nobody responds, or this guy doesn't go to a television website because it's not up to. It's number two. The number two problem is we didn't evolve when we were the big 900-pound gorillas in any market to begin with. We didn't properly calculate where this was going. We waited too long. We outsourced our stuff originally to template services, and we didn't build our own tools. So the combination of those two things has put this genie out of the bottle, and it's not going to go back unless we do something drastic. It's not going to go. It's going to get worse. Like I said last week, we are trained to look at trends. We get two trends. If we're television meteorologists, we have to look at two trends. We have to look at ratings trends, and we have to look at model trends. And we are not looking at the trend of what social media is doing, not only to the weather, but the fabric of society. And we're not responding to it, which is the second time we'll fail this, because we didn't respond at the dawn of the web with making our own proper tools. Fortunately, I have to go do the Fox show. And
if you talk to my classes at the University of Georgia, I'm teaching a satellite meteorology class right now. One of the first things I walk in and do is talk about the forecast funnel. I said, look, if you can just walk in and look at models, I don't consider you a meteorologist. everybody can look at the models now. Do you understand, as Kevin was just saying, do you understand the context of the situation, the synoptic, the mesoscale? I find I'm actually unimpressed by people that just look at models. I want people that can go in and look at the overall context of the evolving weather situation.
That's fine. We all want that, but we're not addressing the foundation problem, which is the distribution. We legitimized those platforms by being there, and we didn't respond in a developmental way.
Well, Kevin, one of the things I proposed as the AMS president, but didn't catch on at AMS, but NWA did go down this road as the digital seals and all these sort of ways of at least putting some markers and credentialing on different sites out there. But then the criticism of that was, well, people don't even know or care what that means when they see it on a TV person's page.
Yeah. No, there were a couple of problems with that. We talked a little bit about it last week. One of them was it was a timing issue. The motivation was right and wrong at the same time. The motivation was a bunch of people who were mad. I'm including myself. I mean the enterprise. A bunch of people that were mad that we let the distribution and the credibility of it get away from us. And so that was a response to, well, somebody sitting in his pajamas in his parents' basement, he can't be as good as us. And so we need to come up with something. That was something for us. And that was the wrong motivation. The other part, it was a timing issue. Had that come out now, maybe it's a little different, but it was bad timing on that, I think.
Yeah, and that's why AMS ultimately didn't go down that road, because we kind of came to that same conclusion independently.
Yeah, I'm going to go yell at my viewers on TV because I have this Fox now that I'm all wound up. I saw James.
And James, what you were saying, we see that playing out in Georgia. I mean, we run, our students at the University of Georgia run Athens, Georgia Weather, which was started by Matt Daniel. And we actually have another site that we're taking over called the North Georgia Weather Authority, which is also run by one of our students. Austin Cheney, who's now on the air in Macon, Georgia. He has 50,000 followers, and Athens, Georgia Weather is 27. So now we are managing an online enterprise with about 80,000 followers ourselves. But it is students that know meteorology. So it's providing hyper local. We are responsive. We're providing what people want. So in a sense, I think, from some of these Mike's weather page and whatever, I think there are lessons to be learned from them, as I think you were alluding to, James. Be responsive. One of the oldest sort of adages in the book is give customers what they want to some degree.
Bingo. And that's what this guy's doing. And so often we're not doing it in the professional world. And the thing I hear over and over, I don't have time to do that. Well, my response is I don't either, but I make time because it is the world we live in, and that's where people are. And if I'm going to mitigate the loss of life during a critical, extreme weather event, whether it be a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, whatever, I have to be where the people are. And that involves old school television, old school radio, and all these social media platforms as well. And I respond, I answer questions. I even dive into the comments section where you'll find a lot of questions. And as we've said, in the great words of the immortal Tony Rice of this program, Facebook is a place of bile and weapons grade ignorance. But yet that's where our people are, and you have to dive in over there. And this has happened in other markets, Marshall. I look at Nashville, and I've got a lot of great friends that work in television weather in Nashville. But who do you think is the dominant social media player in Nashville? It's Nash Severe Weather, run by David Drobny. We've had these guys on this show many times, and they figured it out about always being there. If it's 3 a.m. on a Saturday, they're going to be there with frequent updates across social media and their website. And the same thing in Memphis, really, with Memphis, weather, what those guys are doing. We've had those guys on the show here. And you're right. It goes back to serving people, giving them what they want, always being there, always being responsive. And that's what I've tried to do. And I see that with that Mike's weather page. And we have to learn some lessons from that. And so going back to the original question, should we be showing spaghetti models? My opinion is you can't put that horse back in the barn.
No, you can't.
They're going to be on World News Tonight on ABC. They're going to be everywhere. And we have to be there to provide some context. Say, time out. Let me explain what this means and how these lines are initialized and how you need to interpret this and what we know and what we don't know. Because you're right, anybody can pull up a scary model map or spaghetti plot, but I do think we have to be there with context. and provide that. So it warms my heart to know that you've got students running those sites over there in Athens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
in
they're
Georgia.
running those sites. They're doing. We're trying to evolve. We see the land. We were just talking about this, James. We see the landscape of TV meteorology and meteorology changing. So our whole philosophy is to produce a generation of students that are nimble in the social media space, the digital media space, weathercasting on websites. The idea of just teaching them how to stand in front of a green screen and give the weather anymore, we've kind of moved beyond that with our whole philosophy and that part of our program.
So, and by the way, the reason you're here, one of our listeners wanted to talk about the urban-induced rainfall situations, and we're going to get to that because we know that you got to get up early and you need to. Your time is precious. But I had to ask one AMS question. See,
Sure.
Once you're president, you're always president. Okay, I mean it's just like once president, always president. So I got an email
right now, though.
I got an email, and Troy, I guess you got the same email about dues. Did you get that one, Dr. Shepard?
Well, I know that they're going to a tiered structure based on your income. That's something that a lot of professional societies have been doing. So it's not really a new thing. It's just new for AMS.
Yeah, I occasionally will get over into the broadcast meteorology Facebook group. I don't post over there that often, but boy, that stirred up a hornet's nest.
Well, what's
I hear
interesting,
they're going to do it with CBM too.
Yeah. Well, I know that Marshall, that AAG does it. Yep. They do it tiered structure and have for a number of years, I think now.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm a member of that organization too. In fact, I'm curious, James, because I'm not in. I mean, was it a negative or a positive vibe towards that? Because I thought both people would respond to it.
It was a robust conversation. It wasn't mean spirited, but some liked it, some didn't like it. I don't have a problem with it. It is my position. Is I'm older and I've been doing this a long time to help young people any way I can. And if I can take financial pressure off them, I'm happy to do that. And I have no problem with it. If it's the dues, the CBM or whatever, that's fine with me.
It's just not a new structure. I just want the people that are listening to the show tonight to realize, as Troy mentioned, this is not anything new. There are a lot of professional societies that have been doing this for decades.
And again, I came from a low income background, and as a young student, it would take every penny to join a professional society or to be a member of a professional fraternity. And, I understand how hard that is, and I've got no problem with it, but
I think it's AMS being responsive. And this is something I tried to do during my time as president. There was always this question, well, why should I be a member of AMS? I can't pay that $100. I don't want to pay that $100. But what I've tried to do with AMS and why you should be a member, if you never get anything individually out of AMS, I think any AMS person that's in this field should be members of AMS and NW and others, because these organizations provide a greater good for our community, whether it's speaking out on something like we saw with the whole Sharpie Gate, or providing resources, or providing scholarship opportunities. So I know people tend to be very self-centric, very local in their thinking, but I see organizations like AMS, NW, and others as organizations of greater good, and I'm willing to contribute a small portion of my means because I know in the bigger picture, they're fighting for me in a broader sense, and me meaning the weather enterprise.
Right. And again, the other thing too, I know as I get older how much I don't know. Now, Troy knows everything. He didn't have this problem.
No, I don't. Believe me, I don't know everything. Trust me.
And I appreciate the educational resources I have through the AMS.
Yes.
They're very deep, and you can go into almost any topic where you're struggling or you need an answer, and you can find all of these papers and you can find this research that is just a treasure trove. And so that it's worth its weight in gold for me to be a part of the AMS and the NWA. It's the same thing. I'm involved in both. And, I hope that structure works out the way it's intended to work out. And again, just speaking from some old guy, not that I'm making, piles of money here, but I'm obviously making more money now than I did when I was younger. I'm glad to pay the higher rates to take pressure off to the students, which is fine. So let's move on to, you had a paper in 2005. This was concerning urbanization and increased rain. And this stems from a viewer question, which is why Bill Murray got you on the show. So if you would, Marshall, just kind of walk us through the findings of that research you did back in '05 on urbanization and increased rain rates.
Well, in that '05 paper that you're referring to, James, in a journal called Earth Interactions, actually is a summary paper of a lot of research that had happened even before that. And we've published some other research since on the same topic. So I think everybody's familiar with the urban heat island, the fact that the cities are warmer than surrounding rural areas. But actually, as early as the 70s, Stan Shagnon and some colleagues, they did a field campaign called Project Metromex. And they put weather instruments and radar all around St. Louis because they had this hypothesis that during the warm season, when you had these sort of weak conditions, not a lot of frontal systems coming through, these afternoon thunderstorms in summer were not random. They felt that over and downwind of St. Louis, there was an increase in rainfall and thunderstorm activity. And they showed that. There was some research that came out that said, well, wait a minute, you just looked at one city. I'm not sure how robust this is. So back in 2002 or so, we used NASA satellite data and looked at many cities and found the same thing. And so, there's been this research. My group has done it at Georgia. Many other research papers in the scientific literature that show that in certain situations, not all situations, over and in the climatological downwind regime or region of a city, you have increased rainfall rates, increased lightning even. There's a paper by a guy named Tony Stollins at the University of Kentucky that has shown this as well. Doesn't happen all the time. You don't often see it when you got large scale forcing that swamps the urban signal. But on these sort of garden variety, Stu Ostro at the Weather Channel, he calls them, I forget what he calls them, sort of afternoon sun showers or something. And he always notices them downwind of Atlanta. And so we've put some data on this, and it's real and it's around the world. Now, how does it happen? There are four major players that drive this, what I call in a paper, the urban rainfall effect. You got the urban heat islands, you got to destabilize the atmosphere so the air is rising. You also have buildings in cities that create mechanical turbulence, which causes convergence and uplift. You also have, in situations, aerosols, pollutants in cities. We know that clouds form on seeds, what we call condensation nuclei. And in some cases, the cities can actually cause the storms to bifurcate or split around. So it's a combination of all of those factors. It's a combination of that. Because you have an urban heat island, you can actually get something like a sea breeze circulation, a thermal circulation similar to what you get at the coastal ocean interface. And so those are the physical mechanisms at play.
Is this mostly an effect involving the air mass thunderstorms on hot summer days, or can this happen in the cool season with larger scale forcing?
Well, that's a great question. Most of the research, James, has been on these air mass type up until a few years ago. But even a few years ago, myself and one of my former PhD students, Neil Debbage, who's down at the University of Texas, San Antonio, Troy, down your way, but in San Antonio, we looked at large-scale forcings, just as you mentioned, James, and we see signatures even in some of the large-scale squall lines and larger-scale dynamic events that we can see. There was a paper by a group out of the University of Oklahoma that showed that as tornadic supercell storms were approaching cities like Oklahoma City, depending on the location of the inflow region relative to the city, the heat and moisture, you can affect the supercell evolution. So there's starting to be this new generation of what studies looking at urban effects on the larger scale storm and rainfall activity. So that's kind of an area that's really just kicking off in the last 5 years. But if you go back and look at the last 30 or 40 years, mostly has been these air mass type that the research has been done on.
Marshall, of course, the next question. Go ahead, Troy.
No, I was just going to say, Marshall, there's been some work done, and you're familiar with this area from Austin, San Antonio, down along the Balcones Escarpment. Folks, this is not if you don't know that area around Austin, it is not a line of mountains out here. It's a gradual incline running up into the Texas Hill Country, and we've noticed increased rainfall right along that slope of the Balcones Escarpment. So it's these subtle features, and I would say a city is not so subtle. But it's those sort of things you look at. And this is one reason that I think that geography is so important in meteorology and understanding. You've got to, as much as you want to understand about what's up here, you've got to understand what's down here as well. And I think that's what exactly you're saying, Marshall.
Yeah, no, this is WeatherBrains, so we can kind of get into the weeds here. Mesoscale meteorology. I mean, you've got all kinds of little discontinuities and gradients. I mean, I had a student that looked, James, talking about Alabama and Georgia. If you look at Southwest Georgia and if you look at Southeastern Alabama, just across that border in Southwest Georgia, there's a ton of center pivot irrigation. You go right in Alabama, just across the border, virtually none. So we've looked at just regional microclimate changes because of all that center pivot irrigation in Georgia, and there being none in Alabama. So anytime you've got gradients and land cover, moisture, row crops, topographic relief, as Troy was just talking about, it's going to affect the processes that lead to rainfall and thunderstorms. And cities are just another forcing agent that does it.
It reminds me, Marshall, James, of one situation a few years back. John McLaughlin, who is a friend up in Iowa for a number of years and still up there now, they began to put in these little AWASs at the airports up there, and they begin to notice isodrosotherms, or lines that begin to close off. They island in on Nebraska, and they found out that in a lot of these airport situations, they were putting the AWASs in adjacent to an agricultural field. And just simply because of the moisture being put off by plants, the dew points set up an island in those areas. So even, geography and plant growth and agriculture, these things affect the atmosphere above.
This is why I want to put in a plug for the great meso networks like the Oklahoma Mesonet, for example. We need observations at that resolution, because we know that there are all kinds of little things happening at that scale. So the airport sites or the Raywinson sites, they just don't give us the sort of detail, the picture. If you think about megapixels in your camera, the more megapixels you have in your iPhone, the better your picture is. Well, the more observations you have, the more you can resolve some of these little small scale weather features that might get missed in these larger networks.
So the next question is tornadogenesis. Does urbanization have anything to do with that? And I've been here a long time. We have had a number of tornadoes that have come up on the city of Birmingham from the southwest, and they have lifted very close, or maybe just west of the core of the inner city, and then another tornado forms downwind from the city. I've seen that happen a number of times. And again, it's just an observation, but is there any effect you think on tornadogenesis?
It's anecdotal, but there are certainly some studies that suggest that the city creates some type of dome. Now, the question is it a thermal dome because of this urban heat island, this boundary layer urban heat island, or is it a dome because of the actual physical structure? But colleagues like Bob Bornstein at San Jose State University have published work showing that you can get sort of this fizzling of storms upwind of the city, and even a bifurcation or a splitting. Devna Yogi, a colleague of mine at Purdue University, has published on this, and then a sort of a convergence downwind. So you're not imagining that, James. And again, there's a study I mentioned out of the University of Oklahoma that suggests how the supercells are oriented as they approach the city. The city itself is a warm but relatively dry feature because you don't have as many trees. And so if you've got an inflow region oriented relative to the supercell approaching, that could affect the tornadogenesis in the storm. So these are exciting new areas of research. And if there are any kids out there that are interested in these topics, I know that researchers like me are always looking for good grad students to come, study some of these things, because they're really good topics to understand. This is sort of the holy grail of new storm prediction and weather analysis. It's not just the synoptic scale. We need to understand these things at the smaller scales.
And let's be really careful, too. We talk about a dome in the urban heat island. That doesn't mean that you cannot have a tornado in a major city. Let's be perfectly clear.
Well, Atlanta can sort of attest to that, because in 2008, we certainly had one barrel right through essentially downtown Atlanta and Central Parks. So, yeah, the key message in all of this is that as we know with weather in general, there's no absolute solution. Just because I say that a city can actually create or modify a rainstorm, that doesn't mean it always happens. There are certain meteorological conditions that must be in play, certain other types of flow patterns and whatnot. I've got a student of mine, a PhD student of mine, that has come back to UGA after a stint at the Southeast Regional Climate Center, Jordan McLeod. Jordan may be listening. He's a great follow out there on Twitter too, if you don't follow Jordan McLeod, but he is going to be looking at, for his dissertation, he's really going to dive into this urban rainfall problem.
Well, y'all recall up in Joplin, Missouri, a couple of years ago, the common thought was in Joplin, because it's sort of on a plateau, that's a place where tornadoes don't go. We found out two things on that Sunday evening. Number one, a tornado will go up on a plateau, and it'll also go through the middle of a city. So, it's just like you say, we've got to understand and see what we can find out, but we also understand that Mother Nature is kind of hard to figure out sometimes.
Well, that's a total myth that tornadoes don't hit cities. I mean, I think the footprint of cities have just been so small, but as Walker Ashley and his colleagues at Northern Illinois University have talked about, you've got this expanding bullseye of these metropolitan areas. So it's inevitable we're going to see more and more of these urbanized tornadoes.
Yep. So the next question, snow, ice, any urbanization impact on winter storms?
Absolutely. You're hitting on an area that's sort of my area of real expertise. I'm known for this urban climate work. So I've had a doctoral student. He's actually a professor at Florida State now, Brad Johnson. He published some of his dissertation work last year looking at winter storms in the Northeast corridor along the I-895 corridor there from about Washington, D.C. up to New York. And what he found, and listeners will appreciate this and viewers, is that the distribution of freezing rain and mixed events and sleet events are very different depending on how they're oriented compared to the large cities. And that makes sense because if you think about rainfalls, freezing rain, sleet, and snow, freezing rain is rain that falls to the ground and then freezes because the temperature is below freezing. But if you're in an urban area, oftentimes, even though the surrounding rural areas or suburban areas might be below freezing, they're above freezing in those urbanized corridors because of that heat island. So you're going to have less freezing rain in those areas. And we found that. So there are certainly sort of relationships between sort of the distribution of these surface freezing rain events and the urban heat island.
All right, so and we're going to get you out of here in 10 minutes,
okay,
Dr. Shepard. I promise. I promise. I want to go. You mentioned that 2008 Atlanta tornado. I want to shift gears here for just a second. I wanted to talk about that for a lot of different reasons, but I remember that night. I was our youngest son was 11, and I had gone to throw batting practice with him after the 6 o'clock news. I walked back into the office, and my phone rang, and it was Tom Stipe. Tom is the producer of the University of Alabama Sports Network, and Alabama was playing Mississippi State in the Georgia Dome when this happened. And he said, there's something going on here. We think it's weather related. We have no idea what it is. And I pulled up the radar and my jaw dropped. I'm thinking, wow. I mean, understand this is before dual polarization products, but still you had the suite of old NexRad products, and there's no doubt this thing was a tornado. So I stayed on the air with these guys for probably 30 minutes doing weather while there was a delay in the game. Where were you, Marshall, when this happened? I would assume you were somewhere close by.
I remember that night very well. I was sitting here in this same house I'm sitting in right now watching the game, as a matter of fact. I think if I remember this correctly, that game went into overtime too. It was the SEC
they call it the miracle shot because an Alabama guy drained a 3-pointer to send it into overtime. And if he would have missed that shot, then all those fans would be walking back to their hotel.
Yeah, I think overtime saved hundreds of lives. And here's why I say that. I live in the Atlanta area. I go down to the Georgia Dome and Phillips Arena or State Farm Arena now all the time for sporting events. That area of the Centennial Park region where that was damaged, where the tornado track came through, there would have been hundreds to perhaps thousands of people spilling out of there, walking back to their cars or headed over to the MARTA, the train station. So I really think overtime probably saved lives that night. But I was sitting here in my house, James, watching the game. I saw what was going on, and my wife can attest to this, I immediately ran to my office, started pulling out my laptop, and I started saving radar images because I knew something was going on. And as someone who's inherently a mesoscale meteorologist who teaches mesoscale meteorology at the University of Georgia, I knew that this was an event that I was going to want to revisit. And so we did ultimately revisit it in class.
That's my next question is, have you done kind of a case study review of that event?
We did. John Knox and I, we did a multi-layered review. We did a synoptic scale review. We did a mesoscale review. We even did an urban scale review of that. We also reviewed the sort of social implications of the storm itself, who was injured, what communities were most impacted. So yeah, we sort of dissected that thing from many lenses because it was such a special event. And then a year later, we had a 500-year flood in Atlanta too. So we had two very extreme events, and essentially in downtown Atlanta within 12 months of each other.
Yeah, and I think too, the odd part about that, nobody said anything in the Georgia Dome to anybody. There was no public address announcement initially. People could see the scaffolding was swaying up on the roof. You can go to YouTube and watch this stuff. Yep. And there were ceiling tiles that were falling in. The refs stopped the game. Everybody was looking around. The coaches didn't know. The radio play-by-play guys didn't know. The television guys didn't know for I don't know how long it took them to finally say what was happening. But to me, Marshall, that changed everything with the Southeastern Conference. Now, we can bring in Troy about his buddies down there in Texas, but I think the SEC, with that event, it started the process going from worst to first when it comes to weather safety. Wouldn't you agree with that? That started a process with that?
I do agree with that. I actually sit on the University of Georgia's athletic board, and I know they take weather very seriously here at UGA. I know you're involved in some of the activities with the University of Alabama and their weather warning and alert. So I think it was a game changer. It was really interesting to sort of watch the sort of non-silence or sort of what's going on here with that particular storm event. But, unfortunately, it takes events like that to sort of change the way we think about things and change about the future. And, speaking of AMS, AMS did recently release, I think it was last year, a statement on sort of public venues and outdoor weather events and safety. And Kevin Clazel, who I know has probably been on this show and others, he was the lead author on that. There's some good information in that. And the thing that I like about that is that it says that hope is no longer a plan when you're doing an event and you're having weather. I think people hope and just hope that it's going to not storm or hope that we can get the concert in. That's not going to cut it anymore. So I think there's enough information out there that we can make sound decisions about the weather. That's why, and I know you do too, James, get frustrated when I see people sitting out there in stadiums or on golf courses when there's probably ample information. The duck boat incident in Missouri, that storm didn't come out of nowhere, as the headlines often say. That's one of my pet peeves a little bit. It drives me crazy when I hear this. It came out of nowhere. I mean, that's just a headline that I think people have in sort of automatic copy paste mode. We're not in an era, I would argue, where storms come out of nowhere anymore. We've got dual polarization radar. We've got some pretty good models out there. Now, in an isolated sense, if you're sitting out, and I'm from a rural part of Georgia, if I'm sitting out in someplace and I didn't get any of this messaging, then that probably came out of nowhere from that perspective. But in the big picture sense, that narrative, I'm very adamant that we got to get rid of that.
So
I think it's used, Marshall, in a lot of cases when people aren't paying attention. It was correct. A surprise. Guess what? The fact that you aren't paying attention is not that's not something that I'm going to go with. That didn't surprise people. The Weather Service, just because you weren't paying attention, I'm not buying.
Yeah, I was at a Braves game the other day, and I admitted I was looking out on my phone. I was looking at the radar actually, and I mean, a foul ball came somewhere near me. It didn't hit me, thank goodness. But it's not that I didn't see the warnings that say don't be looking at your phone in these particular seats because there are live balls coming at you. I wasn't paying attention in that moment, and so I didn't see it. That didn't mean the ball didn't come. So.
Right.
I can see it now. Marshall on live television, he's checking radar with one hand. The other hand, he raises it and grabs the foul ball with his bare hand. That would be awesome. Kevin, I got chasing a rabbit. When Kevin was married, and goodness, Kevin, you probably can't talk. I don't know what year this was. After your wedding, we went to a Baltimore game, Orioles, and there was a foul ball coming right at us, our group that came up from Birmingham. And I just spent like $12, to get a hot dog and a drink or something. So I had the choice of, do I just dump this stuff and try and be a hero and catch it? Or do I keep my food? I opted to keep the food, and I ducked, and it landed like right behind me, and I just picked it up and got it that way. But
that's funny. So, I've never heard that story.
Oh, it was awesome. Everybody in your wedding, we were all there, at least the ones from Birmingham that were going back. We were catching a flight out at the BWI up there, but that was a ton of fun. But back to this outdoor venue thing, I wanted to ask Troy a question. But first off, Marshall, you had a situation in your market with a golf tournament here recently.
Yes.
With lightning.
Yes.
So what's the scoop with that? I mean, it sounds like they cleared it out, and just some people didn't pay attention, or they didn't leave.
It's James. This is really interesting because I had a personal friend of my wife's that just went off on me on Facebook because I posted about. She literally went off on me. I was like, oh, whoa! I was like, whoa. I mean, in fact, my wife got a little hot about it too. She said, I don't like the way she's talking to you. Let me tell you what happened. So I posted about that, and she's like, wait a minute, I was there. She said, this is not being played out the way it was. There were that lightning came out of the blue. There was no warning of storms. There was this and that. She just was very offended, which tells me that she probably was guilty of standing under a tree somewhere and shouldn't have been. And so she just kind of feeling a little guilty about it. But I went back because I got very curious about it. So I emailed Keith Stellman, the meteorologist in charge of the Weather Service. I emailed the Sioux over there, Steve Nelson. I emailed Molly McCullum, one of my former students who's on CBS 46 here. And I said, what really went on? Because I was like not really focused. That it didn't come out of the blue. There was lightning all in the area. They had cleared the golf course, stopped the tournament 30 minutes before that lightning strike actually happened. So PGA knew something was up. Now, the reality is, and what probably did confuse people, it was never raining hard at the golf course. It was a drizzly light rain, but there was lightning well within 5 miles of the course. So that's why the PGA stopped the tournament. So the lesson to me in that for people is that you don't have to have a heavy downpour to have a lightning strike. We all know that there are many examples of blue sky lightning, or what we call anvil lightning. And so if there's lightning anywhere in the within 5-6 miles, I think people have to be aware of that and still make a choice not to stand under a tree. Now, I mean, again, maybe some of those people were just walking through trying to evacuate. But again, I want to emphasize the PGA had stopped that tournament 30 minutes before that strike happened.
And Marshall, one other thing, and this may be where James is going with this, is that at the University of Texas, we've got, like many of you see in stadiums where you are, you've got, 90, 100,000 people. And we can make Jumbotron announcements, and we can have them filter down. We've got plenty of room here in Austin at the University of Texas in the mezzanine area to try to shelter people somewhat. But you cannot, just like at the tournament, Marshall, you can't force someone at the point of a gun to leave. And that's one thing at the university, at this campus here. The police officers were in on that briefing. We briefed them what's going on in the EOC when that's happening, but they're told, you cannot forcibly remove anyone from their seat. The best you can do is maybe get their name and contact information in case something happens. You can reach out to their survivors if something happens. But the fact is, you cannot force someone out. I know in the state of Texas, you cannot, in an evacuation, force someone out at the point of a gun.
It's amazing. People will sit there with cloud to ground lightning strikes literally all around them and won't leave. As soon as it starts raining, they leave. So they'd rather not get wet, but risk their lives sitting in a lightning storm. They won't get it.
So the Southeastern Conference rule is 8 miles.
Within a 30-minute wait after that.
Right. So we stop a game, 8 mile lightning strike. What's the Big 12 rule, Troy? Do you know?
Well, it's the 8 miles as well. The thing that we're doing, myself, Kevin Clazel, Eric out at Texas Tech, we have turned in something that's based upon some new AMS research and Weather Service research. And that is and this is a very important if you have a meteorologist working in the EOC and is monitoring live or near live lightning data, and you see one storm producing it, if it's moving, it's 8 miles and moving away from you, you can maybe get back to play a little bit quicker. Just now, if there's other storms out there, guess what? You're going to keep rolling through 30-minute, those 30-minute delays that Marshall's talking about. But at least you might be able to get back to play a little quicker. If you have a meteorologist working in the EOC, that's sort of the rule that Eric and Kevin and I sort of have in working at Texas Tech and OU and also here at the University of Texas. But better safety is always number one thing. And I'll tell you, the University of Texas, I've been on safety and security at UT on our safety and security committee and working as incident meteorologist here since 2005. It's a sea change, Marshall. I will tell you, when I was going to school at Texas A&M many years ago, if a thunderstorm blew up during a football game, you just played harder.
Yeah.
I mean, you kept on going. It didn't make any difference. I think it's a tremendous change we've seen, and I think it's a great change for the better.
We had a rotating wall cloud go over Legion Field in Birmingham during the Alabama-Auburn game in 1983.
Wow.
Tornado warning.
Yeah.
Lightning nonstop. They kept on playing. They didn't even stop. They didn't say anything. If you go back and look on YouTube, you'll see, Keith Jackson, he said it's the worst storm I've ever seen. And it later dropped a tornado east of Birmingham and it killed 2 people.
Wow.
You're right. I mean, times have changed dramatically in my career. It's
Did you guys see the YouTube video of the 2 soccer kids? I believe it was in Jamaica or somewhere in the Caribbean that was struck by lightning, and they actually caught the kids being struck. They just kind of fall on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the more stunning videos I saw on Twitter. It's legit. It's real too. I mean, they were literally just running around playing soccer. And you see the lightning strike, it strikes 2 kids, and they just fall to the ground.
And we had one of those events, Marshall, here in Austin, probably, I guess, 2 summers ago, where kids out near Oak Hill, which is in the southwest side of Austin, were struck on a soccer field in the sunshine from a storm 5 miles away. The National Weather Service documented this. You can see the lightning when it's produced, and it's at 5 miles away. These kids were actually in the sunshine when they were struck.
Yeah, that blue sky lightning, Troy, is something that's very dangerous. And just to, get a little geeky here, I mean, it's typically positive lightning, as most of the WeatherBrains listeners and viewers know. Most lightning is negatively charged, where you've got little negative ions that come down out of the cloud and they meet up with positive, and boom, you get lightning. But oftentimes in the anvil, you get the positive charge coming down, and that's where you get this blue sky lightning. That could be most dangerous because, as you say, you think you're nowhere near the main core of the storm.
Well, you're out. You're out. That's that. You're outside the rain area by, in this case, in Austin, about 5 miles.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we've got to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
I think times have changed a whole lot. Are we there yet? No, but I think we're making inroads, and finally, people are realizing.
And if you don't have an app on your phone, I mean, I think a lot of us use Radar Scope. I know I do. And it certainly has the lightning feature. But I mean, I encourage everyone, even if you're just a casual listener to WeatherBrains, you've got your app. I think everyone, particularly if you're outside, should have some kind of capacity to monitor lightning strikes.
Yep.
All right, Marshall, in the last few minutes we got with you here, I want to shift gears and talk about the future, students going into meteorology. What is the outlook for the students that are going to be coming in over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years in terms of jobs in the private sector and within NOAA? What's your opinion? What do you tell them when they come in?
Not just my opinion. As the director of a major program at major university, I keep very close tabs on this. And my colleague, John Knox, who you know very well, who's actually published in BAMS on the employment outlook, when he published some work back 10 so years ago, it was a little bit bleak. But right now, it actually looks promising. Bureau of Labor and Standards, Bureau of Labor, I don't know what the S stands for, Bureau of Labor and Statistics, I believe it is. Their outlook for meteorology jobs is actually quite positive over the next 10 to 15 years or so, but they do emphasize that most of the growth is in the private sector. And this is something that I try to tell our students. Now, one of the things that I am noticing, and 3 or 4 of you on this panel are in the TV world, just from my lens as a director of a program, I'm seeing a lot of entry-level broadcast jobs out there. I don't know. I don't know if that's I don't know if my pulse is right on that, but I see a lot of those cross my desk out there. I think that the Weather Service, there's a trending up in hiring for National Weather Service meteorologists, and they've actually changed some of the job categories too. I believe they've done away with this MET tech, meteorological technician now. I think they actually call them meteorologists. But here's the thing that I am noticing about the meteorologists going into the Weather Service. At least of the most recent students that we've had had hired into the National Weather Service, every single one of them had a master's degree. They got their bachelor's, but then went on and got a master's degree. So that seems to be a trend, and they want kids that have exposure to GIS and some other things just other than the meteorology courses. So I think there will continue to be a trend upward in the National Weather Service. But where I think the most significant growth is in companies like IBM and Panasonic and consulting firms, people that are doing these Climacell. There are all these little value-added companies that are popping up doing very specialized, targeted weather. I think that's where a lot of opportunities are.
So flesh those jobs out, though. What will those people be doing, especially at entry level, and what should they prepare? How do they prepare for that?
Yeah, I think for a lot of these companies that are popping up, there are people that are doing they're doing forecasting for sure, but there are a lot of data analytics type stuff, Kevin. So if people are, I've got a student of mine, anyone listening, hire the guy, it's Alan Ilanov. He's amazing. He has an atmospheric sciences degree. He's going to leave Georgia with an atmospheric sciences degree and a finance degree. And so he wants to go into the reinsurance or energy risk business. And so he took a lot of analytics type courses. So, I would recommend, here's something that I would recommend for all students. I certainly talk to my students about it. Definitely get your core meteorological chops. And we give you that in our program, and there are others, but also be very exploratory in your minor. Take some data analytics courses, take some GIS courses. Everyone programs. It used to be that everyone would say you need to be able to program. Well, most every meteorology program, atmospheric sciences program, you have to code. But data analytics, GIS, geovisualization, I think these are areas that will prepare you for a job with an IBM or a weather company or a Climacell or some weather analytics, some of these other companies that I'm really starting to see pop up.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I'm seeing, guys, is number of meteorologists that are going in there and getting extra work in emergency management.
That is, and we are actually, I've had several emergency managers asked me if we would do a course at UGA, sort of an online course for a meteorology for emergency managers. But we've taken that a step forward, and this is some breaking news here. We are actually starting a dual program where you can come and get an atmospheric sciences degree and then immediately go into our emergency management master's program, because we recognize that as a growth area as well. Troy, you're spot on with that.
What are the things that are studied in that? I've heard several people in my orbit say, yeah, I'm kind of interested in that, and I would love to know what the specifics are.
University of Georgia has an emergency management and disaster program in our School of Public Health. And in that School of Public Health program, they cover emergency response, disaster response, health related to response. But what we're doing with our program is we're going to now couple that with our atmospheric sciences program, where a student after their third year in atmospheric sciences goes right into that master's, and they start taking emergency management, disaster preparedness, and all of those courses that would be a part of an emergency management master's degree. So,
and Kevin,
and I think they have one of the better programs in the country too. This is something just new to us. I've been at UGA now almost 14 years, and I only knew 2 years ago that we had an emergency management program. So,
well, Kevin, another thing too is the instant command system is so important through FEMA, and that's where I've gotten all my background, is the coursework available online through FEMA. And but that's so crucial. And congratulations, Marshall. That's great news for y'all.
Yeah, we're rolling it out. We're going through the proposal stage at the university, and we've already gotten everything laid out. It's just got to go through the official procedures for being approved. So I'll stay tuned for more information on that. And John Knox, who I know James knows, is very much involved in this process as well.
Awesome. So Marshall, before we let you go, give us a plug for UGA. Why would a student coming out of high school pick UGA over Penn State, OU, Texas A&M? Plug, Florida man, State. Go. This is your free plug away, right? Florida State, your old school.
Yeah, my Florida State. I come out of a traditional meteorology program. I have 3 degrees. I'm a triple no at Florida State University. What I would say is I had a great time and I got a great education at Florida State, but it was a very typical meteorology program degree, very theoretical, Omega equation, quasi-geostrophic equation, all those good theoretical nuggets and vegetables that we need as meteorologists. At the University of Georgia, you get that. You get an AMS certified, a National Weather Service certified program. So we have all the meteorology chops. But because of our relationship with geography, you also get GIS. Because of our relationship with some of the social sciences programs and emergency management, you get exposure to sort of the social sciences and psychology of weather, emergency management. So we like to say that we're building a program that's just a bit more than just the sort of traditional theoretical meteorological approach that you get at some of the big programs. The other thing is you've got direct access to award-winning professors like John Knox and various others. 3 members of our faculty are AMS fellows. One member of our faculty has the NWA's top research award. Several of our faculty are top AMS award winners and have some of the top teaching awards. But here's the kicker: because we're not a program of 150 or 200, you've got access to me or John Knox anytime you need us.
And you beat Notre Dame.
That's right. We did beat Notre Dame. I can't say too much about my Florida State Seminoles right now, but we did get the win against Louisville, so I'm happy. I pull for both.
And plug Weather Geeks, I guess, on any podcast app.
Yeah, go. You can find Weather Geeks wherever you find your podcast, and we have a new episode every Wednesday. I think the current episode running right now is an episode that where I interviewed a guy named Andrew Bloom, who'd be a great guest for you guys as well. He has a really interesting book called The Weather Machine. Talks about the entire process of how our weather forecasts are made end to end. He's a New York Times best-selling author. Fascinating listen if you haven't heard that episode about the whole weather modeling process. So Weather Geeks is out there. And then check out my Forbes. I'm a senior contributor to Forbes, so I write about 5 to 7 articles a month for Forbes on weather and climate issues as well. And check me out Thursday. I'll be testifying before the House Science Committee on extreme weather.
All right. And he'll be the guy wearing the WeatherBrains and Weather Geeks logos on his jacket.
I'm going to get out of here, guys. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
man. Have a great trip, Marshall.
All right, see you guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So Marshall Shepard, thanks to him, we're going to take a quick break with Tony Rice, and we're going to come back with the Weather Roundup, Picks of the Week, email if Aubrey ever comes back, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
This morning at 3:05 a.m. Eastern, 2:05 Central, and so on, the sun moved directly over the equator at a point 130 miles north of Papua New Guinea, marking the astronomical beginning of autumn in the northern hemisphere. That subsolar point has been marching southward since the June solstice, when the sun paused for a moment over the Tropic of Cancer, marking the beginning of summer. It will continue its southward movement until the arrival of winter on December 21st, when the sun pauses over the Tropic of Capricorn, before heading northward again and starting the whole process over. Now, the word equinox roughly translates to equal night, but it doesn't mean we get equal day. If you're looking for the sun to be over the horizon for exactly 24 hours, you'll have to look far and wide, and don't look on the equator. It's not possible for sunrise to sunset to measure exactly 12 hours there. This is all because of atmospheric refraction. Now, when you see the sun peeking over the horizon at sunrise, it's actually about half a degree below the horizon physically. The atmosphere bends that light, giving us a little more sun in the morning and keeping it around a little while longer in the evening, making the day a couple of minutes longer. Also, even when breaking the 24-hour day down into 2 equal pieces, you won't get 12 hours of sunlight. Well, it takes 24 hours for the Earth to complete a rotation, putting the relatively fixed stars back into the same spot in the night sky, better known as a solar day. The Earth continues that orbit around the most important of those stars, our own, the sun. Because of that continued movement along the Earth's orbit, it only takes 23 hours, 56 minutes, and a little more than 4 seconds to put the sun in the same spot in the sky the next day. So, none of this lines up very cleanly with that nice, tidy 24-hour day we know and love. There is a day, however, when the hours of sunlight are pretty close to 12 hours. This is called the equinox, and that day varies by latitude. The higher your latitude, the closer your equinox day is to the equinox. Canada and the US states along the border will see their equinox around Wednesday of this week. It's as late as mid-October in Central America and as early as late August in northern parts of South America. Now, WeatherBrains listeners, along the equator, you'll never see 12 hours of sunlight. But I hope you walked outside at solar noon today to look at the shadows, or the lack thereof, as the sun was directly overhead, making things look like a badly rendered video game. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me in RTP Hokey for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Hey, Troy, you know what Kevin's doing on that phone? He's checking the tweeter and the face bag, both.
Yeah, I know he is.
I know exactly what he's doing. So
that's why I have two phones, so I can check them both at the same time.
Yes, I knew it. So this is Weather Roundup for September 23rd, 2019. And again, where we are in the eastern half of the country, we're going to be under the death ridge for a while longer. Looks like we'll see 90s into October. The west looks a little cold and unsettled. The northern Rockies looks like they're going to get slammed with snow here in about 7 to 10 days if that pattern verifies up there.
Yeah.
But Troy, maybe one day you'll get out of the 90s, huh?
Yeah, and that's what we're kind of watching. I noticed in the European and the GFS, the end of next week, James, that's when that system comes through the Rockies and into the plains. And gosh, I wish something would break the back of this heat. We're still at 100. We're running record number of 100-degree days here in Austin in the month of September at this point, especially at Camp Mabry, which is more of the in-city site, first order site, compared to Austin Bergstrom International Airport, which is outside the city just a bit. But really don't expect, I mean, Kevin's seen, you said, Kevin, your high was 89 today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We were 100 at Camp Mabry again today, and probably going to hold the 90s through the next 7 days, but watching with interest with the changes and perhaps some type of cold front deeper into Texas, one that makes a difference by the latter part of next week.
So let's talk about these tropical systems. We have I guess I'm the easternmost guy on the show. Aubrey apparently is doing some TV work there. We have Lorenzo that's in the East Atlantic that should recurve. Jerry is going to pass by Bermuda tomorrow or Wednesday, and it's on the way out. The Karen is the most interesting one. If this thing survives, and that's a big if, it's going to run into a ridge and it's got a roadblock. And that thing, we might be talking about Karen for the next 4 weeks here.
Karen,
it
that one actually turns north, right? I mean, it swings north up toward Puerto Rico. At least that's the way it was earlier this morning.
Right. It's going north, then it hits the ridge, and it might bend back
west. Right.
Right. And the Gulf of Mexico. And again, it is sheared to death. It's just hanging on. It's hanging in there like a hair in a biscuit. And if it survives, we'll see what happens once it gains some latitude and hits this ridge. But the ensembles are split all over the place. But that's a very interesting storm. And I'm not a hipster. I didn't know about all these memes. I've got to talk to the manager. Are you guys hip with this Karen meme stuff? My wife's name is Karen. I should know this stuff. Troy, you're a hipster, aren't you? I posted the Karen when Karen became a named system. I guess it was yesterday. And goodness gracious, there's hundreds of comments with that meme. Karen's got to talk to the manager. Karen's got to talk to the manager. Karen's got to talk to the manager. And so I had to go do some investigating to see what it means, and I still don't get it. So
okay, well, makes me feel better.
Yeah, I'm no hipster. So let's do again. Aubrey apparently is out, so we'll do email next week. So being that I'm sure I'm the lead of the 10 o'clock news here, let's do picks of the week, gentlemen's. Troy, what you got for us this week?
You got the big horn.
Oh, yes, I do.
I'm sitting here trying to decide on something. I'm digging around, but I can't really find anything tonight.
I'll double horn you, man. All right, Kev, what you got?
This is actually kind of cool. You remember Chinook Janson that was on the show a couple of weeks back? He loves to go out and take pictures, and he came across this thing. I'm going to mispronounce the name. It's if you search in the App Store, it's an app, TPE. It stands for the Photographer's Ephemeris. I don't know what that word means, but that's what it is. But one of the things that he keeps showing me that he uses it for is it will show you where the sunset is going to be in relation to where you are going to stand or where you are standing. So the idea is, like tonight, he wanted to go and take a picture of the sunset over a railroad bridge over the water in Biloxi, Mississippi. And so it showed that, yes, this particular day was going to be the one where the sunset was coming right down the tracks of that bridge. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can look out, if you want to figure it out 6 months from now, you can figure that out as well. And so here's the sunset. Here's where it's going down. Here's where you need to stand if you want to get this particular picture. If you search TPE in the App Store, it's really kind of cool.
Awesome. So my pick of the weekend is an article called "Canceled Hurricane Hunters Cause Blind Data Spots for Forecasters During Hurricane Dorian." Pretty interesting. This is from the Tallahassee newspaper. And I'll read a quote from the article. "The forecasting community couldn't believe that it had to stoop to begging for data on Twitter at a crucial time in the development of the largest, most powerful Atlantic cyclone to make landfall in 84 years. Apparently, multiple missions were canceled." I didn't know this. This is news to me. And they share some tweets from like Eric Blake with the Hurricane Center. "Weather Twitter, if there are any high wind or low pressure observations out there other than Settlement Point still reporting on Grand Bahama, please tag me in them. Very little data in Dorian this morning. Thank you."
Wow.
So a very interesting little piece about the some aborted hurricane hunter missions that I did not know about. So
the things sounds like they're really just about to explode, and it takes two pieces, is sensors. We've had sensors for a long time, but they get smaller and they get easier and simpler. And then what I seem to be reading is that one of the real benefits of 5G, other than our phones, will download radar scope faster, is that it is going to enable sensors to happen more easily and more frequently and in various places. I mean, there was one comparison made, or analogy made, or example, I guess, is made in farming, is that you'll be able to put sensors on cows now, and they'll be able to you'll be able to get data from those sensors over the 5G network, which I thought was interesting. But it sounds to me like this would enable the explosion of weather instruments as well.
Yeah, mesonets should be aplenty with 5G if this ever happens.
Right.
But man, there's a lot of pushback from people on the
Yep.
cancer scare and all this other stuff. It's a big topic here. In fact, it was on the news this evening. But guys, I've got to go here. I got to change clothes, do some television. So we got to wrap this one up. Thank you for listening. WeatherBrains is typically on the air Monday nights at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern. Live.bigbrainsmedia.com. Many people watch directly on YouTube. We had to take the chat room down off live.bigbrainsmedia.com. There was naked women in there. When we checked it one time. So the chat session is over on YouTube. Anyway, the email address for all of us, it is email@weatherbrains.com. Our picks of the week, the show notes all up on weatherbrains.com, as well as our social media accounts, even Kevin's that he never gets on. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thanks, guys. Y'all have a good week.
We're gonna wrap